are things that people don't really like to talk about. They're things that aren't always acceptable to talk about out in the open, and we often don't really want to admit to them. Doubt in particular is one, especially in Christian circles, that a lot of people don't like to admit to because it feels kind of embarrassing. To not have it all together, to not have any doubt is kind of assumed. And so some things that I say tonight might push your ideas a little bit, might make you a little bit uncomfortable, but stick with me, and we're gonna jump into it. So quick sneak peek for you. I'm gonna tell you the truth about doubt. I'm gonna explain the dark side of it, and then I'm going to sprinkle in some biblical characters who have experienced doubt, and their stories have been recorded in the Bible, and we're gonna look at what they did when they faced it. So here's the truth about doubt. Anyone who has ever done anything, period, has doubted. Shocking. So if we just put religion aside for a hot sec, and we're just gonna look at your decision to come to a university. I want you guys to raise your hands. How many people here applied to at least one of their schools besides Wisconsin or NATC or Edgewood or Whitewater? Raise your hands. Awesome. Okay, hands down. Majority of the room. So, you guys applied to other schools. You're here now, so the point that you applied to other schools is not really important. But you applied to other schools because you weren't sure you were going to get in, or you weren't sure you were going to like it here, or you weren't sure if you could afford it. And those are okay, because ultimately you made the decision, and you moved forward, and here you are. And maybe you're not even in school right now, and that was something that you still probably had doubts about doing. But in both cases, you looked up the information you had, and you made a decision. You worked through your doubts, and you definitely didn't stop caring about whether or not you were going to school just because you weren't sure about it. And the same is true of our faith. Doubt is not a sin. Yep, there it is. Okay. Thanks, Megan. God does not look down on you for doubting. In fact, he expects you to doubt. We're going to look at a passage from Matthew 14, starting in verse 28, when we see the disciples, and they see Jesus out on the lake, and they don't immediately recognize him. So Peter says, "Lord, if it's you," Peter replied, "tell me to come out on the water." "Come," he said. Then Peter got down out of the boat, walked on the water, and came towards Jesus. But when he saw the wind, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, cried out, "Lord, save me." Immediately Jesus reached out his hand and caught him. "You of little faith," he said, "why do you doubt?" So when Peter saw the winds and the waves, he began to doubt. He didn't know if he could trust God to get him out of the storm. And what does Jesus do, though? Does he make him swim back to the boat? Does he just let him drown? No. Jesus immediately reaches out his hand and takes a hold of Peter. God does not see your doubt as a sin, but he does want to pull you out of it. God doesn't expect us to be ultra-spiritual people, and he definitely doesn't turn us away when we come to him with questions. Doubt is something that I have personally experienced my fair share of when it comes to God. I've had a hard time trusting his character, and often even his existence. I had called myself a Christian my whole life, but coming into college, I still had a lot of questions. Freshman year, I met up with a friend of mine who I knew had spent plenty of time looking and had claimed himself to be an atheist. He asked me to prove my faith sitting next to him in a Gordon's booth, and I felt really trapped. I had no idea how to defend my faith, and it magnified all of the doubts that I was experiencing to a point where I didn't even think I could call myself a Christian anymore. That was a tough reality, and I realized I either had to fight my way through it or just let it overtake me. And this, my friends, is when we turn to the dark side of doubt. Okay. I know. You guys better recognize this picture. It looks a little goofy. But just hang with me for a second. I'm using this. So take a look at this picture and tell me, I want you guys to shout out, how do you think these cows feel about the fire? Unfazed, I'm hearing. Doubtful. Warm, maybe they're getting a little warmed up. Do they seem to care? No, there's no concern that there's a raging fire behind these cows. And this is what I want you guys to think of when you think of apathy. Apathy is defined as a lack of interest, enthusiasm, lack of concern, as our friends, the cows, clearly demonstrated. So a lot of people think that the opposite of love is hate, but in reality, the opposite of love is apathy. They did a study on married couples, and they found that the only distinguishing thread that separated the married couples and the couples that were going to get divorced was that in the married couples, both people were interested in a relationship. Basically, the biggest thing that separated successful couples and not successful couples was caring, i.e. the opposite of apathy. God knows we're going to experience doubt, and he knows we're going to experience anger, and he knows we're going to experience sadness. There's actually an entire book of the Bible called Lamentations. This is a book of poems written to describe the destruction of Jerusalem. And in Lamentations 1:16, we see the heart cries of the author. For these things I weep. My eyes flow with tears, for a comforter is far from me, one to revive my spirit. My children are desolate, for the enemy has prevailed. So I don't know about you guys, but this definitely does not sound like a song of someone who is stoked about God. This shows a real, raw emotion. God does not want us to be lukewarm. In another verse, Romans 12:11, we read, do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord. Basically, have some energy about God. Be pumped. Be at least interested. So apathy can take us into some dark places, can leave us feeling alone, without community. General apathy has even been linked outside of religion to poor mental health. Doubts are only a problem when they lead us into apathy. And doubts should, in fact, instead lead us to find answers. So that night after my freshman year, I had to decide, was I going to let my doubt get the best of me and let my unanswered questions kill the faith I was interested in? I knew I had the resources around me to start answering those questions, and so I got down to it. It's actually kind of crazy now, looking back at how dramatically my view of God has changed. I really didn't know how God was supposed to look in my life, and I definitely wasn't convinced of the whole Jesus Savior thingy. But I started asking around, and the things that I didn't about the things I didn't understand, and the things I heard other people say, and pieces started to click into place. The more I pursued God, the more it made sense to me. But it all started with a willingness to seek and ask. If you do not take a good hard look at apathy you might be hanging out with, it will suck the life out of your relationship with God. So maybe you're sitting here and you're not sure about this God thing to begin with. Maybe you were taken to Sunday school as a kid and thought it was boring. Or maybe people have told you, just gotta have faith. Maybe you resent God because of how you've seen Christians treat other people. There are a lot of things that could be preventing you from being interested in a relationship with God. Maybe you've even heard the phrase, truth is relative. This is pretty common in our society today. This is the idea that what you want to believe can exist for you, and what I want to believe exists for me. But I can't argue that each of us interpret life differently. But truth, by definition, cannot be relative. Every truth is objective. If you don't believe in gravity, is it still going to hold you to the earth? If you believe with all your heart and all your might that a hot burner is cold and you touch it, are you going to get burned? The answer to both of these questions is yes. So the objective truth could be that there is a God who created and wants to have a relationship with you. And I believe that we as humans have some sort of responsibility to use the time we have here to figure out why we were created. This goes for Christians and non-Christians. I want to challenge you guys tonight to seek the answers to the questions you have. What if God is waiting to play a role in your life? Is this something that you want to ignore? I'm not saying this to try to scare or guilt you into anything, but I would absolutely hate for you guys to miss out on the genuine peace that comes with a surrendered life because of apathy. God is big enough to handle your doubt and apathy, and if you don't know that yet, he is waiting for you. God sent a piece of himself down into earth in the form of Jesus so that we would no longer have to wonder if we were good enough. God accepts us at face value. If you trust that, God has the best for you, go home tonight and tell him that. I promise you, you do not need to be doubt-free to do it. All right, so we got our bases established. Doubt is not a sin, and doubt should lead us to find answers. So I'm going to spend the rest of the time talking to you guys about two questions that we ask ourselves when we're faced with doubt. And the first question is it true? We think about this question after we get asked things we can't answer, like me my freshman year, or when there's a new idea that challenges our perception of God. We are definitely not alone in this. How many people here have heard the phrase doubting Thomas? Does that sound familiar? Awesome. So if you weren't aware, this actually comes from one of the 12 disciples of Jesus. There's a little cartoon I have to illustrate. All I'm saying is we don't call Peter denying Peter, or Mark ran away naked Mark. Why should I be saddled with this title? I see your point, Thomas, but really it's time to move on. Poor Thomas. We all have doubts, but he just got the title, Doubting Thomas. And so we're going to pick up our story after Jesus has died and been resurrected, which is actually a pretty fitting timeline considering that we just celebrated Easter this past week. So at this point, Jesus has died on the cross and his friends have buried him. Then 3 days go by and people are saying they saw that Jesus is alive. So we pick up in John 20:24. Now Thomas, one of the 12, was not with the disciples when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he said to them, "Unless I see the nail marks in his hands, and put my finger where the nails were, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe." A week later, his disciples were in the house again, and Thomas was with them. Though the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then he said to Thomas, "Put your finger here, see my hands. Reach out your hand and put it in my side. Stop doubting and believe. Because you have seen me, you have believed." Then Thomas said to him, "My Lord and my God." Then Jesus told him, "Because you have seen me, you have believed. Blessed are those who have not seen, and yet have believed." So we see in this story that Thomas has no choice but to believe in Jesus as Lord because he's literally standing right there in front of him. When he was asked the question, "Is it true?" he had to say yes. And I'm sure I'm not the only one when I admit that there are times that I've wanted God to show up and just be like, "Yo, it's me. Hey, God." But the chances are pretty unlikely that we are going to encounter God in a physical form in this lifetime. Jesus tells us that blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. He knows because we will not see him that we're going to have to trust other things, like our emotions and the evidence he's left and scripture that he left for us. In Hebrews 11, 1 and 2, we read that faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we cannot see. It's having a confidence that God is worth betting on, that God's existence is worth hoping for. And this idea is actually not so radical. If I could take the rest of tonight to walk you guys through some different apologetics topics or way of demonstrating rationale behind believing Christianity, I would, but they only gave me 25 minutes. So what I can say is this: there are about 1.5 million resources out there to get you guys started. Start asking the people around you, your disciplers, your Bible study leaders, and your peers. And if you don't know anybody that can answer these questions, there's also books. Some suggestions to start you off are Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, if you want something a little more philosophical. Or I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist by Frank Turek and Norman Geisler. Or Reason for God by Timothy Keller. And if you're like me and listening to things is a lot more engaging than reading them, you can also get those on audiobooks. In Matthew 7:7, we are told, "Ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you." So tonight, seek the answers to your doubts and you will find them. I'm not promising it's going to be immediate, but the door will be open to understanding if you continue to knock. All right, so that's the first question. Is it true? The second question, and the other part of doubt, is it worth it? And this one's often a lot more challenging once we accept the truth. We may still experience doubt about whether or not we want to stick to it. This one has been especially tough for me to answer. There have been times when Christianity has felt pretty exclusive. There have been times when maintaining my faith has been uncomfortable around friends and family. I have experienced doubt and asked myself the question, is it worth it? I now want to turn and look at Peter when he was faced with a similar situation. This story takes place right after Jesus had given a sermon about he was the bread of life, and it challenged a lot of people to the point of them turning away. Let's look at John 6, starting in verse 66, and that says, from this time many of his disciples turned back and no longer followed him. You do not want to leave too, do you? Jesus asked the 12. Simon Peter answered him, Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. We have come to believe and to know that you are the Holy One of God. Honestly, this is one of my favorite passages. I love how Jesus asked the question, you do not want to leave too, do you? That he gives us the choice right there. He's not demanding of the disciples' allegiance, though he loves them dearly. And Peter's response is one that I hope rings true for you too. Lord, to whom else will we go? We know that you are the God, and there's no turning back now. This is the same Peter that doubted God on the lake, the one that we saw start to sink. This is the same one that denied him 3 times. Peter doubted God, but in this moment, when he and the other disciples are experiencing doubt after a tough teaching, his response is one of confidence. What else is going to bring you peace? What else is capable of taking your burdens? I hope Peter's question is one that you can remember when you are facing doubt for yourself. I hope that the heart behind it anchors you to God the same way that it anchors Peter, and I can now say anchors me. This past year, I asked to meet up with another friend of mine, similar to freshman year. I knew he was an atheist, and I knew he was probably going to present some questions that I had never heard before, and I was right. He said some things that made me doubt if the faith that I had was as bulletproof as I thought. And this time, though, each new doubt that I had, I looked at as an opportunity to understand more. I no longer saw the questions as threats, but as things worth exploring. I hope you are willing to explore starting tonight. I hope you start to unravel some of the lies you might be believing, and you might start fighting the apathy that you're feeling. So that's all I have for you. I'm going to close this in prayer, and once I'm done, the band's going to come back up, and then you guys are going to see a video of a spoken word called "A Shadow of a Doubt." I came across this my sophomore year, and I often actually go back to it when I'm experiencing doubt because it's a really good reminder that when we're asked the question, is it worth it? The answer is always 100% absolutely. So let's pray. Lord, thank you again. I feel like I just talked to you, but here we are. I just ask for all of us. Lord, we're guaranteed to experience doubt in this walk. It's not meant to be easy. It's not supposed to be easy. If it was easy, it wouldn't be worth believing. And so we're just grateful for this life we have, and whether or not we're pursuing you in it. I'm just so hopeful that we will see pursuing you as worthwhile, God, that through the doubts, you would be worth more to us, God, that the things we're experiencing that we think are fulfilling us will ultimately leave us feeling empty, and that we just spend the rest of our lives working through the doubts that we're guaranteed to experience, and come out on the other side closer to you. So thanks again, and all these things in your name we pray.